Imagine this. One normal morning, the kind of morning every family has, you're standing in the kitchen making coffee while your wife helps your daughter get ready for school. The sun is shining through the blinds, cartoons are still playing faintly on the living room TV, and nothing, absolutely nothing, feels unusual. Then suddenly, within just a few minutes, everything changes forever. Your wife hugs your daughter goodbye, kisses her forehead like she always does, and then walks out the front door. Except this time she doesn't come back. Not later that day, not the next morning, not even a week later. She disappears, no warning, no message, no trace. And in that single moment, your entire life tilts upside down. Now let me ask you, if that happened to you, what would you do? Would you believe it was just some kind of misunderstanding, or would you immediately fear the worst? That's exactly the question I had to face, and that's the story I'm going to take you into tonight. Now, before we go deeper, let me stop here and talk directly to you, because I know why you clicked this video. You're curious. You saw the title and felt that chill run through you, that voice in your head whispering, "What if this happened to me?" You want answers, and I promise you, if you stay with me until the end of this video, you're going to get them. This isn't just another random mystery you scroll past. This is a real story that pulls you in, because at its heart, it's not about strangers. It's about family, trust, and the terrifying realization that the people you think you know best might be hiding secrets so deep they could shatter everything. I want you to lean in and listen carefully, because every detail matters here, and the way this unfolds is going to stay with you long after the video ends. When I think back to that morning, it's the small details that haunt me the most. The way my wife tied our daughter's hair into a neat little braid while humming under her breath, the way she lingered just a little longer in that hug, as if memorizing the feeling of holding our child close. At the time, I brushed it off as a sweet motherly moment. But later, replaying it in my head again and again, I realized that hug wasn't ordinary. It was the kind of hug people give when they know it's the last time. Now, if you're watching this, I know you've probably had moments in your life too where something small seemed normal at the time but later revealed itself as the biggest clue. That's the psychological grip of this story, because I want you to ask yourself as you watch, what moments in your life might not be as ordinary as they seem? And here's the thing, nothing about my wife's disappearance made sense. There was no fight, no warning, no hidden tension. We weren't a perfect couple, no one is, but by all accounts we were steady. We had plans, routines, family dinners, even vacations scheduled. Who just vanishes in the middle of all that? And even more chilling, why would she vanish after leaving such a clear emotional mark on our daughter with that last goodbye? That's what drew me into an investigation that turned my entire world inside out, and that's why you're here, because you want to know what I discovered, step by step, piece by piece, as I started pulling at threads I didn't even know were there. Trust me, this isn't a simple missing persons case. This is a family mystery that forces you to rethink everything you believe about love, memory, and the people closest to you. Now, I want to make a personal connection with you, the viewer, because I know you're not here just for entertainment. You're here because something about this story speaks to you. Maybe you've lost someone before, maybe you've had moments of doubt in your relationships, or maybe you've simply wondered what you would do if your life turned upside down in 1 second. That's the hook here. It's not just about me, it's about you too. I want you to imagine your own kitchen, your own front door, your own family routines. Imagine watching your spouse leave like they always do, except this time they never come back. Can you picture the panic? The confusion? The denial that creeps in as hours turn to days? That's the emotional weight I want you to carry as we dive deeper into this journey, because once you feel it, you won't be able to look away until you find out the truth. And that's why this video is more than just a story, it's an experience. I want you to feel the suspense crawling under your skin. I want you to notice how your heart beats faster with each detail, how your mind starts trying to solve the puzzle before I give you the answers. That's what makes mystery stories trending right now on YouTube so powerful. They're not just watched, they're felt. And if you've been following channels that dive into true story mysteries, psychological thrillers, and real-life disappearances, then you know how addicting it can be when the truth is just out of reach, waiting to be revealed. So, I'll say it clearly. Don't skip, don't click away, because every second of what you're about to hear matters, and I promise, you will be rewarded with answers you didn't see coming. The first few days after she disappeared were the hardest. People will tell you time slows down, but that's not true. It speeds up. Hours vanish without you realizing, swallowed by police reports, phone calls, checking credit card activity, retracing steps. And yet, at the same time, your mind gets stuck in moments like quicksand. Her voice saying goodbye, her hand holding our daughter's, the sound of the door closing. I felt trapped between past and present, unable to move forward, unable to stop looking back. And if you're still with me right now, I know you're invested, because you're probably asking yourself, did she leave on her own? Was she taken? Was there something about her life I never knew? That's where the real story begins, and that's where you and I are going to walk through this together. Let me also introduce the key players in this story. My daughter, innocent, too young to fully understand what happened, but old enough to sense that her mother didn't just go on a trip. My wife, who, up until that day, seemed like an open book but was hiding chapters one had never read. And me, the husband left standing in the ruins trying to piece together a picture when half the puzzle pieces were missing. Around us there were others too. Friends, neighbors, family members, each with their own theories, their own secrets, their own role in the disappearance. Some helped. Some made things worse. And one or two, well, let's just say not everyone around us was who they claimed to be. You'll see what I mean as the layers peel back. When I reached into my daughter's backpack that morning, I wasn't expecting to find anything unusual. I was only checking to make sure she had her homework and lunchbox, because her routine was the one thing I was desperately trying to hold onto after my wife's sudden disappearance. But inside, beneath her coloring books and a half-crushed granola bar, was a folded note in handwriting I knew all too well, my wife's. My hands shook as I unfolded the paper, half hoping it would be something ordinary, something that explained where she went. Instead, it was just one line, asterisk, take care of her if I can't. Asterisk, no signature, no date, no explanation. Just that one haunting sentence. And in that instant, the mystery deepened because those words didn't sound like my wife at all. She wasn't the type of woman who would run away, and she certainly wasn't the type to talk in riddles. I was only checking to make sure she had her homework and lunchbox, because her routine was the one thing I was desperately trying to hold onto after my wife's sudden disappearance. But inside, beneath her coloring books and a half-crushed granola bar, was a folded note in handwriting I knew all too well, my wife's. My hands shook as I unfolded the paper, half hoping it would be something ordinary, something that explained where she went. Instead, it was just one line, asterisk, take care of her if I can't. Asterisk, no signature, no date, no explanation. Just that one haunting sentence. And in that instant, the mystery deepened because those words didn't sound like my wife at all. She wasn't the type of woman who would run away, and she certainly wasn't the type to talk in riddles. That's when I realized I was standing at the edge of something far darker than I could have imagined. Over the next few days, I tried to replay every single moment leading up to her disappearance, as if by carefully reassembling our recent life I might stumble onto a missing piece. The truth is, nothing had seemed out of the ordinary. We'd had dinner together the night before she vanished, we laughed about some silly commercial on TV, and we even planned to visit her parents over the weekend. There were no fights, no suspicious phone calls, no late-night arguments. At least that's what I thought. But as I sat in that kitchen night after night, staring at the chair she used to sit in, I started asking myself questions I didn't want to ask. Had she been hiding something from me? Was there something in her past she never told me? Was there someone else in her life who knew more about her than I did? These questions weren't just idle thoughts anymore. They became an obsession, and each one pulled me deeper into uncertainty. The police tried to reassure me, telling me sometimes people just leave, that stress or personal issues can make even the most stable person walk away from their lives without warning. But I couldn't accept that explanation. If you knew my wife, you'd understand she wasn't someone who quit on her family. And yet, as much as I wanted to believe that, little things began to surface that didn't add up. A neighbor claimed they saw her talking to someone in a car the week before, but they couldn't remember the make or the model. A coworker mentioned she had been more distracted than usual at the office. Even my daughter, who was only 8, whispered that she had overheard her mom crying in the bathroom late at night. Each of these details felt like puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit, and instead of bringing clarity, they made the picture blurrier. The more I tried to dig into her life, the more unsettling it became. I checked her phone records, only to find a string of calls to a number I didn't recognize. When I dialed it, it went straight to a disconnected line. I searched through our shared laptop and noticed she had recently deleted a folder, something she had never done before. And then there was the locket I found tucked away in the nightstand, a locket I had never seen with a photo inside of her and a man I didn't recognize. My first instinct was to believe the worst, to assume betrayal, but the truth is the photo didn't feel like proof of an affair. It felt like proof of a past I had no idea existed. And that realization cut deeper than anything else. At the same time, I couldn't ignore the people around us. When someone disappears, you quickly learn that everyone suddenly has a theory, and some of those theories can be just as dangerous as the truth. My brother-in-law hinted that my wife might have been under too much pressure and needed to escape. My best friend suggested maybe she had stumbled into trouble at work. And then there were the whispers from the neighbors. Some even speculated that maybe I had something to do with it. It's strange how fast people can turn suspicions on the person closest to the missing one, and soon, I felt the weight of eyes on me everywhere I went. That's another layer of this kind of mystery. When you're searching for answers, you're also trying to prove your own innocence in the eyes of everyone around you. But the truth is, I wasn't innocent in every sense either. No one in a marriage ever is. I had my own secrets, things I hadn't shared with her, moments I wish I could take back, conversations that ended in silence instead of resolution. And maybe that's what makes this story so unsettling for you watching right now, because we've all had those moments. You've probably had them too, the things you wish you said, the times you brushed off your partner's strange mood, the times you assumed tomorrow would always come. But what happens when tomorrow doesn't? What happens when you realize you weren't paying attention to the signs? That's the spiral I was in, and that's the spiral I'm pulling you into now, because the truth is never simple. It's tangled in choices, regrets, and shadows you didn't even know were there. And the more I searched, the more I realized I wasn't the only one pulling at those threads. There were other people asking questions too, people I didn't know, people who seemed to be watching me. I noticed a car parked down the street 2 nights in a row, the same car with the same dent on the bumper. I got a phone call from a blocked number where no one spoke on the other end. My daughter told me someone had been standing by the school fence at recess, someone she didn't recognize but who waved at her as if they did. Each of these moments added to the unease, and I began to wonder, was her disappearance truly voluntary, or was there something or someone pulling her away from us? That's the terrifying part of this story. It's not just about a missing wife, it's about the layers of uncertainty that surround every step. Was she running from me? Was she protecting our daughter from something bigger? Or was she taken by someone who had been lurking just out of sight all along? Those are the questions that kept me awake at night, and those are the questions I'm laying out for you, because as you'll see, the deeper we go, the less clear the answers become. And just when I thought the trail was cold, just when I was about to give up, something else happened. Something that pushed me into territory I never expected. A week after she disappeared, I came home late from work to find the front door unlocked. My daughter was asleep upstairs, safe, thank God, but in the middle of the kitchen table was a single envelope with my name on it. No one else had been in the house, no windows were broken, no signs of forced entry. And inside that envelope was another note, written in the same hand as the one I found in the backpack. But this time the message was different, and it wasn't just a goodbye, it was a warning. When I opened that second note, my heart dropped, because it wasn't just a goodbye anymore, it was a command, almost a threat. In my wife's handwriting, the message read, "Stop looking. You'll only make it worse." I must have read those words 100 times trying to figure out what they meant. Worse for who? For me, for her, for our daughter? And if she was the one who wrote it, then how had the note ended up in my kitchen without me hearing a single sound? That moment left me frozen in my own house, because it meant someone could slip in and out without leaving a trace, someone who was either helping her or holding her. I didn't know which was more terrifying, that she was out there willingly leaving these messages, or that she was being used to send them. The next morning, I rushed to the police with both notes, thinking they'd finally take me seriously. But when I got there, only the first note, the one from my daughter's backpack, was in my bag. The second one, the warning, had vanished. I tore through every pocket, every folder, even the car, but it was gone. The officers exchanged that look I had grown to hate, the one that silently suggested I was under too much stress, that maybe I was imagining things. And when they finally left me sitting there with nothing but their polite sympathy, I realized someone wanted me to doubt my own sanity. That note had been real, but now it was as if it had never existed. That was the first real obstacle, the moment I knew I couldn't rely on official help anymore. If the evidence kept disappearing, then the only person I could trust was myself. But trust became a slippery word, because soon the people closest to me started to feel less certain too. A few days later, my wife's best friend Rachel showed up at the house unannounced. She hugged my daughter tight and then pulled me aside, her eyes darting around like she was afraid someone was listening. She told me there were things about my wife's past I didn't know, things even she had only learned recently. When I pressed her, Rachel hesitated, finally saying, "She wasn't always who you think she is." Then she clammed up, claiming it wasn't her place to reveal more, and left before I could get another word. That vague warning haunted me, because it was the first time someone close to her admitted there was a hidden chapter in her life. Yet, at the same time, it made me question Rachel herself. Why would she dangle that information and then run? Was she protecting my wife, or was she part of whatever forced her away? As I dug deeper, I realized there had been cracks in our life I ignored. There was that trip she took last year, claiming it was a work retreat, but when I asked to see photos, she said her phone had died the whole weekend. There were the nights she claimed she had late meetings, but when I called her office, no one knew about them. Back then, I chalked it up to stress, to overthinking, to the paranoia that creeps into every marriage at some point. But now, in light of her disappearance, those excuses no longer felt innocent. They felt like breadcrumbs I had been blind to follow. And the more I started connecting these dots, the more pushback I got. One night, after putting my daughter to bed, I found an envelope taped to my car windshield. No note this time, just a single photo of me standing outside my own house, taken from across the street. Someone was watching me and they wanted me to know it. That was the second obstacle, fear. Not just the fear of losing my wife, but the fear that by digging I was putting myself and my daughter under a spotlight I couldn't see. Yet even then I couldn't stop. If anything, it drove me harder because now I knew someone was actively trying to silence me. It was during this time that another shadow entered the picture, someone who claimed to be on my side but who never sat right with me. His name was Daniel, a co-worker of my wife's who reached out after she went missing. He insisted he wanted to help, that he knew her well, maybe even better than most colleagues. He offered details about her habits at work, told me she seemed stressed, that she mentioned feeling trapped. At first, his information seemed helpful, but something about him was off. He asked too many questions about me, about my daughter, about what I had found so far. And the way he spoke about my wife, like he knew her more intimately than I ever had, planted a seed of doubt I couldn't shake. Was he a concerned friend, or was he hiding a deeper connection to her disappearance? All these threads tangled together and I felt like I was walking in circles, each clue contradicting the last. One night, while going through our old photo albums, I found something I hadn't noticed before. In one picture of a family barbecue from years ago, standing in the background half out of frame, was the same man from the photo in her hidden locket. It wasn't a stranger, it was someone who had been close enough to hover at our gatherings unnoticed by me. That discovery made my blood run cold, because it meant her secret wasn't from a distant past. It was woven into the very fabric of our lives. Just as I was about to piece together who he might be, something else happened that pulled the rug out from under me. I went to grab the locket from the nightstand, the one piece of evidence that tied everything together, and it was gone. Not misplaced, gone. I tore the room apart, pulled out drawers, even searched the trash, but it had vanished as cleanly as the second note had. That's when it hit me, I wasn't the only one searching for the truth. Someone else was always one step ahead, watching, waiting, and taking whatever I found before I could use it. And then came the twist that left me staring into the darkness of my own home, unable to breathe. The night the locket disappeared, I tucked my daughter into bed and she whispered something that shattered me. She said, "Daddy, Mommy came back last night? But she told me not to tell you." When my daughter whispered that her mother had returned in the middle of the night, I froze, unable to process the words. She was calm when she said it, almost too calm, as if this secret had been burning inside her for hours and she was finally letting it out. I tried to press her gently, asking when it happened, what her mother said, what she looked like. My daughter swore she saw her mom sitting at the edge of her bed, stroking her hair, whispering for her to be brave, and promising that everything would be okay, but with one condition, that she must not tell me. Hearing those words ripped through me because it confirmed two terrifying possibilities: either my wife had returned secretly, sneaking into the house without my knowledge, or someone else had been there pretending to be her. And both of those possibilities were worse than anything I had imagined before, because if my daughter was telling the truth, it meant the boundaries of safety I thought I still had were already broken. As I sat with that revelation trying to make sense of it, the story took another unexpected turn. A few days later, I got a call from my sister, who lived 2 towns over. She had received something in the mail that rattled her so badly she almost drove straight to my house without calling first. When she opened her mailbox, tucked inside an unmarked envelope, was a single photograph. It was a picture of my wife holding our daughter at the park, but it wasn't a recent shot. It was taken years ago, a day I remembered clearly because I had been the one behind the camera. Except here's the part that made my sister's hands shake when she told me. In the corner of the photo, someone had circled my wife's face in red ink, and underneath was a single phrase written in handwriting that matched the notes I had found. Asterisk, "You don't know her like you think you do." Asterisk. That was the moment when the mystery began to expand beyond just me and my daughter. Whoever was behind this wasn't just targeting us anymore. They were pulling in my family, widening the circle, making sure the ripples spread outward. And what scared me even more was the question it raised. Why my sister? What role did she have in this? Was she chosen because she was close to us, or was there something in her connection to my wife that I didn't understand? Suddenly, everyone I thought I could rely on became a question mark, even my own blood. From there, the contradictions started piling up. I had always believed my wife's disappearance began the morning she hugged our daughter goodbye, but the clues didn't line up neatly anymore. If she really was gone, why would she risk sneaking back into our house, especially to warn our daughter to stay silent? If she was in danger, why would she leave cryptic notes that only increased the risk? And if she wasn't the one behind all of this, then who knew her handwriting well enough to mimic it flawlessly, and why were they so intent on playing this twisted game with me? I found myself pacing the house at night, double-checking locks, staring out the window at every passing car, and wondering if I was unraveling the truth or if someone was deliberately weaving a new story just to confuse me. That paranoia only grew when Rachel, my wife's best friend, resurfaced a week later. She called me late one night, her voice shaking, insisting we meet in person because she had found something I needed to see. When we sat down in the dim light of a diner off the highway, she slid an old letter across the table. It was written to her by my wife years before, long before she and I even met. The letter talked about mistakes, about debts owed, about a decision that would haunt her forever. Rachel wouldn't explain how she had kept it hidden all this time or why she chose this moment to share it, and when I pressed her, she snapped, insisting she was trying to protect me. But from what? From whom? That's when I started to suspect that Rachel knew far more than she was letting on, and maybe she wasn't a friend at all. The worst part was how everything I discovered seemed to contradict the last clue, leaving me with no solid ground to stand on. One moment, I believed my wife had left willingly, trying to escape some secret from her past. The next, I was convinced she had been taken and was being forced to send these messages. And then, just when I leaned one way, another piece of evidence would appear and pull me in the opposite direction. It was like someone was deliberately controlling the flow of information, making sure I never saw the whole picture at once. And that brings me to the night I realized the stakes were higher than I ever imagined. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. No words this time, just a video file. With shaking hands, I opened it. The footage was grainy, shot from across a parking lot, but there was no mistaking who I saw. It was my wife, alive, pacing back and forth while talking to someone whose face the camera never revealed. She looked anxious, glancing over her shoulder, clutching something in her hands. And then, before the video cut out, she mouthed something into the darkness, and though the sound didn't carry, I could read her lips clearly. She said, "Don't trust him." But the question that ripped me apart wasn't what she said, it was who she meant. The night I watched that grainy video of my wife pacing in the parking lot, mouthing those 3 words, "Don't trust him," something inside me shifted. Until then, I'd been clinging to the hope that maybe this was all just a misunderstanding, some elaborate test of patience that would eventually collapse into a simple explanation. But as I sat there replaying that clip again and again, I knew it was darker than that. My wife wasn't just missing, she was trapped in something far bigger, and now, whoever was behind it had shifted their focus to me. That realization sank into my chest like a weight I couldn't lift, because if they had my wife and they had access to my home, my family, my life, then I wasn't just searching for her anymore, I was fighting to survive. That fear became all too real the next morning. On my way to drop my daughter at school, I noticed the same gray sedan in my rearview mirror. At first, I brushed it off, telling myself it was just another commuter on the same route. But then I changed directions at the last second, turning off into a neighborhood I never drive through, and the car followed. I took another turn, then another, and still, it stayed behind me, never too close, never too far, just enough to let me know it was there. My palms gripped the steering wheel tighter as I tried to keep my voice calm for my daughter in the back seat, but my mind was racing. Who was inside? Was it the same person who had been leaving the notes, the one who stole the locket, the one who sent the video? And most terrifying of all, was my wife somewhere in that car? I dropped my daughter off at school with a smile I forced onto my face, telling her I'd be back on time to pick her up. The second she walked inside, I parked down the block and waited. The gray sedan passed slowly, pausing just long enough for me to see the outline of a driver's silhouette before it disappeared around the corner. My body was trembling, not just from fear but from the overwhelming realization that I wasn't imagining any of this anymore. Someone was watching me, tailing me, making sure I never strayed too far from their sight. And as much as I wanted to chase that car, to rip the door open and demand answers, a voice in my head reminded me of my wife's warning, "Don't trust him." But who was him? Could it be the driver, Daniel, Rachel, or even someone I never suspected? The paranoia began to eat away at me because in that moment, I realized I didn't truly trust anyone at all. The fear of being followed gnawed at me, but what happened that night nearly broke me. I came home after work to find the house dark, my daughter in bed, the quiet hum of the fridge the only sound. For a few moments, everything seemed normal. Then I noticed the picture frames on the living room shelf had been rearranged. Small details, but enough for me to know someone had been inside. My stomach dropped as I rushed upstairs, checking every room, every closet, every lock, but the house was empty. When I returned to the living room, I saw what they had left behind. Another envelope, this time placed deliberately on the coffee table. I tore it open, expecting another cryptic message, but instead, it contained a single Polaroid photo of my daughter asleep in her bed, taken that very night. My blood ran cold as I realized the photo was no more than an hour old. That was when the weight of the danger became unbearable. They weren't just watching me anymore, they were inside my home, inches away from my sleeping child, reminding me how powerless I was. My hands shook so badly I dropped the photo, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I broke down completely. I sat on the floor with my head in my hands, every fiber of me screaming to protect my daughter, to pull her out of school, to drive until the gas ran out and disappear before these people could take her too. But another part of me knew that running wouldn't solve this. They would follow because they already knew everything. They had been one step ahead since the beginning, and if I left now, I might never find out what really happened to my wife. In those moments, the questions spun faster than my mind could keep up with. Was my wife working with them, leaving those notes and warnings because she believed I couldn't protect her or our daughter? Was she trying to keep us safe from a past mistake that was finally catching up with her? Or was she as much of a prisoner as I was, her words twisted and used against her? And then, in the deepest corners of my mind, another thought clawed its way forward. What if the person I thought I knew, the woman I built my life with, was part of this all along? That's the kind of thought that keeps you up at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if you ever truly knew the person you loved most. Just when I thought I couldn't handle any more, another disappearance drove the knife in deeper. Rachel, my wife's best friend, the one who had dangled secrets in front of me like bait, suddenly went missing herself. Her phone was disconnected, her apartment door left ajar, and the only trace she left behind was a sticky note on her kitchen counter with my name written on it. No explanation, no message, just my name. The police didn't connect the dots, claiming there was no evidence linking her case to my wife's, but I knew better. It was too much of a coincidence, too precise, too carefully orchestrated to be random. And if Rachel had vanished, was it because she knew too much? Or because she had been part of this from the start and her role was finished? By then I couldn't tell what was real anymore. Every sound outside felt like footsteps, every shadow in the window looked like someone watching. The walls of my home didn't feel safe, the faces around me didn't feel trustworthy, and even my own memories of my wife began to twist into something I couldn't recognize. The more I tried to protect my daughter, the more I realized I had no control at all. And then came the final blow of that week, the one that made me realize there was no going back. Late one night, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a note or a photo or a video. It was a live call. I answered with my heart pounding, and though the voice was faint, filled with static, I knew instantly who it was. It was my wife. And the only words she managed to get out before the line went dead were, "You were never supposed to find out." When my wife's voice crackled through the phone with those chilling words, "You were never supposed to find out, I thought I had hit the peak of this nightmare. I thought I had reached the point where the mystery couldn't twist any tighter, where my nerves couldn't be stretched any thinner. But what happened next proved me wrong. That call wasn't the end of my search. It was the beginning of a truth that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my wife, my marriage, and even myself. The very next morning, while my daughter was at school, I got a knock at the door. It was Daniel, my wife's co-worker, the one who had been orbiting too close for comfort since all of this began. He looked nervous, almost pale, as if he had wrestled with the decision to show up. He didn't bother with pleasantries. He just asked if he could come inside, and against my better judgment, I let him. We sat in the kitchen, the same kitchen where I had last seen my wife alive, and he pulled a flash drive out of his pocket, placing it on the table between us like it was a loaded weapon. He told me he had been keeping something from me, not out of malice but out of fear. He said my wife had confided in him months ago, telling him things she hadn't told anyone else. Things about her past. Things about me. I wanted to throw him out right then, to tell him I didn't need his half-truths and vague warnings, but the way he looked at me stopped me. His eyes weren't just heavy with guilt, they were terrified. He leaned closer and whispered that my wife hadn't just disappeared. She had been running from something for years, long before we ever met. And the worst part, he said, was that she wasn't running from strangers. She was running from people she once loved. I demanded he explain, but he only slid the flash drive closer and told me to see for myself. Then he stood up, muttered that he had already said too much, and walked out the door without another word. When I finally opened the files on that drive, my entire world tilted. There were documents, old police reports, court records, newspaper clippings, all tied to a woman who shared my wife's maiden name. A woman who looked just like her but who wasn't her. Or maybe she was. My chest tightened as I realized the truth staring me in the face. My wife had been living under a new identity. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I built a family with, had another name, another past, and another life that she had erased before I ever met her. In those files, I saw connections to a case that had gone cold years ago, a case involving fraud, betrayal, and a family torn apart by lies. My wife wasn't just a victim in this story, she had been a player in someone else's long game. The more I read, the more the ground beneath me crumbled. One clipping mentioned a man who vanished around the same time my wife changed her name. Another detailed a financial scandal involving missing money that was never recovered. My mind spun back to the locket I found, to the unfamiliar man in the photo, to Rachel's vague warnings, and suddenly the pieces started fitting together in ways I didn't want them to. What if my wife wasn't taken at all? What if she had left because the past she tried so hard to bury had finally caught up with her? And what if the people chasing her weren't strangers, but the very ones she had once betrayed? But the real twist didn't come from the files. It came later that night when my daughter woke up crying and said she had another dream about her mom. Except this time she insisted it wasn't a dream. She said her mom had sat on the edge of her bed again, whispering, telling her she loved her, but then she said something that made my blood run cold. My daughter swore her mom told her that I wasn't supposed to know the truth, because if I did, I'd never forgive her. That was when it hit me. The notes, the warnings, the missing evidence, even the threats, they weren't just meant to scare me. They were meant to control what I knew, to keep me trapped in the dark, because the truth wasn't just about her disappearance. The truth was about who she really was, and what she had done before she ever became my wife. And the most devastating realization was this: maybe the people following me weren't trying to hurt me at all. Maybe they were trying to stop me from uncovering something they knew would destroy me. Because if my wife had built her life on a lie, then the person I loved, the person I thought I knew better than anyone, might have been a stranger all along. And if that was true, then the biggest question wasn't whether she was alive or gone, it was whether she had ever really been mine at all. But just when I thought I couldn't stomach any more revelations, the phone rang again. I answered, expecting silence or static, but instead a man's voice spoke for the first time since all of this began. Calm, steady, and deliberate, he said, "Asterisk, you've been looking in the wrong direction. She wasn't running from us, she was running from you." Asterisk. That phone call shattered whatever thin line of stability I had been clinging to. Asterisk, she wasn't running from us, she was running from you. Asterisk, the words looped in my mind like a curse, cutting into every memory I had of my wife until I didn't know what was real anymore. Was he lying to manipulate me, or had my entire marriage been a carefully constructed performance? The hardest part wasn't even believing the voice, it was knowing that deep down, a part of me couldn't dismiss it entirely. Every unanswered question from the past, every night she came home later than she promised, every secret she tucked behind a smile, they all suddenly felt like evidence stacked against me. For the first time, I wasn't sure if I was the victim in this story or if I was the reason it had begun in the first place. I couldn't ignore it anymore, and so I did the one thing I had been avoiding since the beginning. I confronted Rachel's brother, Eric. He was someone I'd known for years, someone who had always been around family gatherings, who had checked in on me since the disappearance. He seemed like one of the few people still on my side. But when I looked him in the eye and asked directly if he knew who my wife really was, he went quiet. His silence was an answer in itself, heavier than any words could be. After a long pause, he finally admitted that there had been whispers, that Rachel once told him my wife's past wasn't what it seemed, and that she had crossed people she could never truly escape from. I pressed harder, desperate for names, for specifics, for anything concrete, but instead, Eric leaned forward and gave me an ultimatum that shook me to my core. He told me if I kept digging, I wouldn't just lose my wife, I would lose my daughter too. That was the impossible choice laid bare in front of me. I could stop now, pretend none of this ever happened, and try to build some version of a normal life with my daughter. Or I could keep pushing, keep clawing at the truth, knowing that every step closer I took might put her in greater danger. I wanted to scream at him, to demand why I should give up on the woman I loved, but his expression told me he wasn't speaking out of malice. He was speaking from fear. Fear of the same people who had taken my wife, fear of the same forces that now had their eyes on me. And as much as I hated to admit it, part of me wondered if he was right. But how could I stop when the evidence wouldn't let me? That night, I found something in my wife's old jewelry box, hidden behind a false bottom I had never noticed before. Inside was a folded photograph, worn and creased, showing her standing with a man and a woman I didn't recognize. On the back was a handwritten note that said simply, * choices were made. Debts must be paid. * My heart pounded as I realized that whatever this was, it had been planted there for me to find, like another breadcrumb in the trail. And yet, the discovery only deepened the impossible decision I faced. Should I show this to the police and risk them turning their suspicion fully on me? Or should I destroy it and risk erasing the only proof that could lead me closer to her? Either choice carried a cost I wasn't sure I was ready to pay. Sleep became impossible. Every creak of the floorboards felt like footsteps. Every car idling outside felt like someone waiting for me to slip up. My daughter started noticing the way I checked the locks 3 times before bed, the way I jumped at the phone ringing, the way my eyes scanned every face at the school pickup line. I was unraveling and she could see it, and yet I couldn't tell her the truth. How could I tell an 8-year-old that her mother might not be who she thought she was? How could I tell her that we were being stalked, manipulated, and used as pawns in a game I didn't understand? And then, as if fate was listening, another blow came to remind me there was no safe ground left. A message appeared on my phone, this time not a video or a photo, but a simple text. It read, * You've asked enough questions. Choose her truth or your daughter's safety. * My hands went cold as I realized this wasn't just an abstract threat anymore. They were forcing me into the corner I had dreaded since the beginning. If I kept chasing the truth, I might finally uncover the full story of my wife's disappearance. But if I did, I might also be handing my daughter over to the same shadows that had already slipped into our home, already watched her sleep, already left Polaroids to remind me how vulnerable she was. That was the moment it all crystallized. The mystery wasn't just about finding my wife anymore. It was about deciding what mattered more, the truth or survival. And as much as I wanted both, I could feel the walls closing in, forcing me toward a choice that would break something inside me no matter which path I took. Because what if the truth I was searching for wasn't just about her? What if the truth was about me too, and the role I had unknowingly played in everything that happened? And just when I thought I was paralyzed by indecision, my daughter came into the kitchen holding another envelope she said had been slipped under her bedroom door during the night. I opened it with trembling hands, bracing for another warning, but instead, inside was a single sheet of paper with one chilling sentence scrawled across it. * She told us you'd never choose her. The message in that envelope, * She told us you'd never choose her, * didn't just shake me, it split the ground under me wide open. My first instinct was rage, a raw, unfiltered fury at the faceless people who had slipped into my home again, taunting me, controlling me. But beneath that rage was something even more poisonous, doubt. What if my wife had actually said those words? What if she had looked them in the eyes, whoever they were, and admitted she didn't believe I would ever stand by her side? The weight of that thought crushed me in ways no threat ever had. It wasn't just about fear anymore, it was about betrayal. If she didn't trust me, then who had she trusted? And why was I still clawing at this nightmare, risking my daughter's life, if the woman I loved had already given up on me? That's when the conspiracy stopped feeling like a shadow and started revealing its true size. It wasn't just about my wife disappearing or cryptic notes, or people sneaking into my home. It was about something bigger, something that had its roots tangled in the lives of everyone around us. Because not long after that message, I learned the most devastating truth of all. Eric, the man I had turned to for answers, the man who warned me to stop digging, wasn't just a worried bystander. He was in it. I found out the hard way. After days of sleepless paranoia, I followed him one night when he left his house. I trailed him through back roads and into the industrial edge of town, where he parked outside a warehouse that looked abandoned. My pulse hammered as I watched him from the shadows, my mind screaming that I should turn back, that bringing myself here was reckless. But something stronger kept me glued in place because I had to know. I watched as Eric stepped inside, and only minutes later, another car pulled up, the same gray sedan that had been stalking me. When its driver got out, my world tilted so violently I thought I might collapse. It was Daniel. The two men shook hands like they'd done it 1,000 times, like they were brothers in some dark cause I couldn't yet name. All the nights Daniel pretended to help me, all the times Eric warned me to stop digging, it was all part of the same script. And in that moment, I understood the scale of what I was really facing. This wasn't random. This wasn't a handful of strangers tormenting me for sport. This was organized, calculated, coordinated. And it had been unfolding for far longer than I ever realized. I should have run, but I stayed long enough to hear Eric's voice carrying out through the still air. He said, "He's close. Too close. If he finds her before we're ready, Everything we've built falls apart. My stomach turned as Daniel replied, his tone cold, "Then we'll use the girl. He won't risk her. He never does." Those words sliced through me because they weren't wrong. My daughter was my weakness, the one tether keeping me from breaking apart entirely. And now I knew for certain, they weren't just threatening her, they were planning to use her as leverage. That realization hit me harder than anything else had, because it proved the conspiracy wasn't about my wife alone. It was about control, about power, about dragging me into a game where my love for my daughter could be weaponized against me. The betrayal ate at me as I drove home in silence, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. Everyone I had leaned on since the beginning, Rachel, Eric, Daniel, had been part of it in one way or another. Rachel had tried to pull away, maybe even tried to warn me, and that's why she disappeared. Eric and Daniel were deeper in, pulling strings, watching me like a puppet. And my wife. She had been caught in this long before me, her identity, her secrets, her past all woven into their scheme. Suddenly, the locket, the notes, the photographs, even the video of her whispering, "Don't trust him," made horrifying sense. She wasn't just warning me about one man, she was warning me about all of them. The urgency slammed into me harder than ever before. This wasn't a mystery I could solve slowly, piece by piece, because the longer I waited, the closer they came to pulling my daughter into their orbit. I knew now that my wife's disappearance wasn't an isolated tragedy, it was a symptom of something sprawling, something with layers I hadn't even touched yet. People I thought were friends, people I thought were family, were tangled in this web. And the worst part was knowing that they were right about one thing: I was close. I was standing on the edge of the truth, but the cost of stepping over that line might be everything I had left. That night, after putting my daughter to bed, I sat alone in the living room staring at the photo of my wife holding her as a baby. For the first time, I let the full weight of the choice settle on me. If I pushed forward, if I confronted them, I might finally uncover what she had been hiding all along, and maybe even find her. But if I did, I knew it meant stepping into their world fully, risking not just myself but my daughter as well. The conspiracy wasn't just around me anymore, it was inside my life, inside my home, inside the very people I thought I could trust. And once I made my next move, there would be no turning back. Then, just as I started to break, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a video or a text. It was a live stream link. With trembling hands, I clicked it open and my blood froze. On the screen was my daughter's school playground, empty in the darkness, but filmed from a distance, like someone was waiting for morning to come. A message flashed across the video. Asterisk, tomorrow you choose. Her or her. Asterisk. The night before everything came crashing down, I sat awake in the living room with every light in the house burning, my daughter asleep upstairs, and my mind churning with the weight of what tomorrow would bring. The live stream of the playground had made it clear. They were setting the stage for a confrontation, one I could no longer avoid. It wasn't about whether I wanted to keep digging anymore, it was about whether I could summon the strength to walk into the fire and face the truth that had been circling me like a predator since the day my wife disappeared. Every instinct told me not to go, to scoop up my daughter and vanish into the night, but deep down I knew running wouldn't save us. They would follow, because this was never just about my wife's disappearance. This was about control, about silencing the truth, and about breaking me until I became nothing more than another pawn in their story. I dropped my daughter at school the next morning with a goodbye hug that lasted longer than usual, my voice steady for her sake but my insides unraveling. I told her I loved her, and as I pulled away, I locked eyes with her teacher and silently prayed this would not be the last time I saw my little girl's face. Then I drove to the place they had been steering me toward all along, the warehouse on the edge of town, the same one I had followed Eric 2 days earlier. Every mile closer, my chest grew tighter, my palms damp against the steering wheel, my mind torn between fear and fury. When I finally pulled up, the gray sedan was already there, parked like a sentinel, and I knew this was it. I took a deep breath, grabbed the folded photograph of my wife I had carried in my pocket, and stepped out of the car. Inside, the air was thick with dust and silence, broken only by the creak of my footsteps on the concrete floor. Then I saw them. Eric and Daniel, standing side by side, their faces calm, like men who had been expecting me for a long time. Behind them, in the shadows, a figure stepped forward slowly, and my heart nearly stopped. It was my wife. Her hair was shorter, her face thinner, but her eyes, those eyes I knew better than anything, were locked on me with a mixture of pain and something else I couldn't read. Relief? Regret? Fear? I froze, every muscle in my body tensed, my breath caught between disbelief and fury. After all this time, after the notes, the photographs, the warnings, here she was, alive. Before I could speak, Daniel raised his hand, calm but commanding, and said, "Now you understand. She didn't leave you. She was never yours to keep." The words landed like a hammer blow, and I looked to my wife, desperate for her to deny them, to rush into my arms and prove that everything had been a manipulation. Instead, she lowered her head, tears streaming down her face, and whispered, "I tried to protect you." The truth spilled out in a rush, each piece striking me harder than the last. Years ago, before she ever met me, she had been part of a scheme with Daniel and Eric's family, a scheme that had ended with betrayal and missing money. To survive, she had erased her identity, built a new life, and thought she had escaped. But her past had never let her go, and when I came into the picture, I became a liability. The notes, the warnings, the disappearances, they weren't meant to torture me, not at first. They were meant to keep me from uncovering who she really was, because if I knew, I would either turn her in or become a target myself. And now, because I had pushed too far, they were giving me the choice she had feared all along: her or our daughter. The warehouse air felt suffocating as Eric stepped closer, his voice sharp and cold. "You walk away now and we let you and the girl live in peace. But she stays with us. If you fight, you'll lose everything." The ultimatum hung heavy in the air, and my chest ached as I realized the impossible trap I was in. My wife's tearful eyes met mine, silently begging me to choose our daughter, to let her go, to walk away from this nightmare and keep our child safe. But the thought of abandoning her, of leaving her in the hands of men who had manipulated and terrorized us, was unbearable. I was cornered, every instinct screaming in different directions, my heart split in two. I don't know what possessed me in that moment, maybe it was rage, maybe desperation, but I pulled out the folded photograph of her and thrust it toward them. "This," I said, my voice shaking but loud, "this is proof you've been playing both sides. If you kill me, if you touch my daughter, this goes public. Everything. Your names, your history, all of it." The bluff poured out of me before I could think, my only weapon in a room where I was outnumbered and outpowered. For a second, the silence stretched, their eyes locked on me, measuring whether I was bluffing. Then the unexpected twist I never saw coming happened. My wife stepped forward, took the photograph from my hand, and instead of tearing it up or siding with them, she turned to Daniel and Eric and said, "It's over. I'm done running." Her voice was steady, stronger than I'd ever heard it. In that moment, I realized she had been playing her own game all along. The notes, the cryptic warnings, even the staged sightings, they weren't just for me. They were her way of buying time, of creating doubt, of keeping me alive long enough to force this confrontation into the open. She hadn't just been protecting me, she had been maneuvering the entire time. But just as a flicker of hope sparked inside me, Daniel lunged, fury in his eyes, and the room erupted into chaos. The struggle was fast, violent, desperate, shouts, crashing metal, the sound of fists and desperation colliding. I fought like a man with nothing left to lose, and for the first time, my wife fought alongside me, her betrayal and secrets momentarily forgotten in the face of survival. By the time it was over, the warehouse echoed with silence again, broken bodies and broken truths scattered across the floor. I staggered, blood in my mouth, chest heaving, and turned to my wife. For a brief moment, I saw the woman I had fallen in love with, standing in front of me, alive and real. But before I could reach her, before I could ask what came next, she whispered one last thing that stole the ground from under me. Asterisk, you were never supposed to be part of this story. Asterisk, and then she slipped into the shadows, gone before I could stop her, leaving me with more questions than answers. As I stumbled out of that warehouse into the cold morning air, I realized the cruelest truth of all. The conspiracy hadn't ended. The mystery hadn't been solved. My wife was alive, but whether she was free, guilty, or still playing the game, I might never know. And as I drove back to pick up my daughter, one thought haunted me more than any threat or note ever had. Maybe the person I had been searching for all along wasn't the woman I thought she was, but the stranger she had been hiding inside. In the weeks that followed the warehouse confrontation, my life became unrecognizable, a strange balance of quiet normalcy and unspoken fear. The police came into the picture, of course, after anonymous tips and reports of disturbances led them to that decaying building on the edge of town. They found evidence of violence, fragments of a story that almost made sense, but not the people who had once stood inside with me. Eric and Daniel had vanished without a trace, and with them went any official proof that tied them to the years of manipulation, surveillance, and terror that had consumed my life. My wife was gone too, as though she had dissolved into the shadows she had always lived in. And yet, even with so much unfinished, a strange kind of peace began to settle over me. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was survival instinct, but after so long living on the edge of paranoia, I realized that peace didn't come from answers. It came from deciding which questions you were willing to live without. Every day I held on to the one certainty that mattered: my daughter. She was my anchor, my reason to fight, and the only piece of this nightmare that hadn't fractured beyond recognition. I focused on her, on school pickups, on making her pancakes shaped like animals, on letting her climb into my lap when the nightmares woke her in the middle of the night. She never asked directly about her mom after that, but sometimes I would catch her looking out the window at night as if expecting a figure to appear on the sidewalk. And sometimes, when she thought I wasn't listening, she whispered to herself that mommy still loved her. I never corrected her. In truth, I didn't know if it was a dream, a memory, or a hope she clung to, but I decided some mysteries were kinder left untouched. The biggest question that haunted me wasn't whether my wife was alive, because I knew she was, but whether she was safe or if safety had ever been possible for her. I pieced together enough from what she confessed in that warehouse to understand the scale of her secrets. She had built her life on lies, not out of cruelty but out of desperation, trying to outrun a past that wouldn't loosen its grip. For years I had thought I was her rock, her safe place, but the truth was she had been building walls around me as carefully as she built them around herself. That hurt, and some nights the weight of it crushed me all over again. Yet at the same time, I couldn't shake the memory of the way she fought beside me in those final moments, the way she looked at me before disappearing once more. It wasn't the gaze of a stranger, it was the gaze of someone who had loved me in her own broken, complicated way. In time, the conspiracy that had swallowed us whole seemed to dissolve back into the shadows. There were no more cryptic notes, no more cars trailing behind me, no more Polaroids slipped under doors. Either they had gotten what they wanted or they had moved on, or maybe, just maybe, my wife's choice to confront them had given us a reprieve I'll never fully understand. The silence itself became unnerving at first, like waiting for a storm that never came, but eventually I learned to breathe in it, to find comfort in the absence of threats. I rebuilt slowly, piece by piece, clinging to the routines that gave my daughter and me a sense of normalcy. For her, normal was everything. For me, normal was survival. And yet, the story never really ended. One evening months later, while cleaning out the drawer of my wife's nightstand, I found something I had missed before: a folded piece of paper tucked deep in the corner. My chest tightened as I opened it, expecting another cryptic clue, but instead it was simple, almost painfully so. It was a handwritten note, no date, no context, just a few words in her familiar script. Asterisk, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't stay. Trust that I loved you. Protect her. That's all that matters now. Asterisk. I sat there for a long time, staring at the note, my throat tight with grief and relief all at once. It wasn't the closure I wanted, but it was the closure I needed. The acknowledgement that even in the chaos of her secrets, she had loved us. And yet, just when I felt ready to tuck the note away and let the past stay buried, I noticed something strange. Faintly, pressed into the paper beneath her writing, was another set of words, like someone else had written on the sheet before she used it. I held it under the light, squinting at the indentations until the message became clear. It read, asterisk, this isn't over. Asterisk. That single line reopened every wound, every fear, every sleepless night. It reminded me that stories like this don't end cleanly, that even when the surface is calm, there are shadows moving underneath. I don't know if my wife wrote it herself, if one of them planted it, or if it was just an echo of the life she left behind. But I do know this: I will never stop looking over my shoulder, never stop watching the door, never stop wondering when the past will reach for us again. For now, though, I choose to live in the space between. I tuck my daughter in each night, I tell her I love her, and I hold on to the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, that's enough. And while the world may never know the full story of my wife's disappearance, I carry it with me, not as a riddle to be solved, but as a reminder of how love and secrets can shape a life. Because sometimes the truth isn't about finding every answer. Sometimes the truth is about learning which questions you're willing to let haunt you forever.